Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is U.S. immigration attorney Hardin Tripathi from Trip Law. Today, I want to speak with you all about the E-2 visa. We've been doing this series for a little bit, and I just wanted to get the viewership here an idea of what does it require to even qualify for an E-2 visa. I think our firm has been speaking about all these variety of different parts of an actual E-2 visa, but what does it take you to qualify? Is this even an option for you? And if it isn't an option based on certain parameters, how do you get a good lawyer here at Trip Law who will protect you and ultimately show you the pathway so that you can get that E-2 visa? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this video today. So ultimately the E-2 category, right? The E-2 visa category, it's a non-immigrant visa. And what the difference between an immigrant visa and non-immigrant visa, a non-immigrant visa means that you have to have the intent to depart. There's a lot of other factors to it, which we'll tell you about when you come to our consultation, but ultimately a non-immigrant visa means that it's basically you're here for a temporary amount of time, and then you have to have the intent to depart back to the home country. But the E-2 visa is very, very strong visa in our opinion, in our professional opinion, because it is a category of people who want to invest in the United States. Uncle Sam really likes investors who come in and invest in the United States and ultimately develop and direct, right? They are developing and directing operations in a commercial enterprise. This is something that I find very fascinating for our clients. We have clients from all over the world. Lately, we've been getting clients from Mexico. We've been getting clients from India. We've been getting clients from all over. And we'll kind of talk about treaty nations and things like that. There are ways to ultimately have a strategy if you're not a treaty-based nation to ultimately come to the United States and invest in that E-2 program. So there's a lot of great ways to ultimately go about this. But before we get into it, what is the E-2 program? Well, the E-2 program is a program that was created and promulgated by Congress. And ultimately, the whole goal of it was to stimulate the U.S. economy. And the way that worked was that there would be investors from other countries who had a treaty with the United States that ultimately were able to prove to the government and to USCIS and the State Department, specifically the State Department for this visa, that they were people who were able to stimulate that economy, ultimately add to the value of the GDP of the United States of America, and ultimately provide value to these great United States of America and to the people that live here. So ultimately, there was a lot of treaties created, and there's a whole bunch of law and treaties. We'll kind of walk you through all that, but ultimately what happens is if you are a E-2 investor, if you are listening to this video, you're reasonably wealthy or you have some money that you're willing to put towards the United States and create a business here. May it be a convenience store, maybe a restaurant, may it be a consulting business, maybe an IT company, whatever it may be. We realize there are ways to actually go about basically getting this sort of E-2 visa in a way that complies with U.S. law, regulations, and policy. A lot of the times, though, I get a lot of questions. We'll make a separate video on this later about real estate investments, and we'll kind of walk into that as well. But right now, I just kind of wanted to have this short little video under maybe 15 minutes or so, just so you have a nugget of information on what are the requirements to get an E-2 visa, what are the qualifications for you to even qualify to get that visa, and ultimately, how do you get this E-2 treaty investor status that ultimately protects you, it protects your spouse, so he or she who's listening in, who is your loved one, also gets derivative E-2 beneficiary status, and then your unmarried child under the age of 21 who's a minor also gets that status as well. And that leads to them having public education, that leads them to having the rights afforded to them that most students get in the United States. So a lot of our investors that we've had conversations with aren't really doing it for the ROI. They're actually doing it because they want a better life for their family. And I think that's one of the most important components of this program. And I think that's what Congress really intended, was not only would the U.S. economy be stimulated, but rather the family members of these wonderful individuals who are leaving their home country, putting so much money into the U.S. economy, are ultimately having a benefit as well for their immediate family members who ultimately are also coming here and leaving their homeland so that they can also carry on either that legacy of that family business or ultimately decide to do different things in their way of life and ultimately bring all that culture with them. So now we're going to jump right in. There's about 9 different things. So this is the time where you want to whip out that piece of paper and a pen and take some notes. If not, give us a call at 863-370-2427 or email us at info@trip-law.com. That's info at trip, the hyphen sign, law.com. Give us a shout. We'll be more than happy to walk you through all of these. But this is just an educational video, not legal advice, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea, high level. When you start watching these YouTube videos, well, what are the requirements? What qualifies me as a businessman or woman to ultimately come to these great United States of America, invest in this U.S. economy, and ultimately reap the benefits, but at the same time help the U.S. government and the economy and the American people? So it's a two-way street. That's kind of what they're going to look for in the State Department interview, and that's why we're going to go through these 9 separate action items that are ultimately required. So let's jump right in. Number 1, it's basically that there has to be a treaty, right? A requisite treaty does have to exist. So you do have to have a treaty nation. So there's a long laundry list of treaty nations that are nations that have treaties with the United States that allow E2 investors to come here. Now, if you're listening to this and you're not an E2 treaty nation, don't be alarmed. There are ways to ultimately utilize your nationality from that ultimate country that you're from and ultimately come here using a different passport or a different nationality to then apply, because at the end of the day you're applying based on your nationality. A lot of things that we have done is we've taken clients from different countries, may it be India for example, and we've taken Indian nationals and have them become Antiguans, and using their Antigua passport we then utilize that to then apply to the United States. Completely legal, completely ethical, and these are the laws that the U.S. has promulgated based on the Honorable Congress, and ultimately these are options available to those non-treaty countries that you may be able to utilize. So if you have any questions on that, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to talk to you about creative solutions and strategies to ultimately get you that visa for you and your family, even if you're not an E2 treaty-based country, or if that's where you're from, based on your passport. So that's number 1. You basically have to have a requisite treaty, right? There has to be a treaty from that one country to the United States. That's number 1. Number 2, you ultimately have to be an individual or a business who possesses that nationality from that treaty country. So your principal place of business, your headquarters, your ultimate corporation, or wherever it's headed. If you yourself are from that home country that happens to be a treaty-based nation, that's also going to be very important. So that's number 2. You have to be either as a business owner, as a man or a woman who's a business owner in that business, or that business itself, where it's principally located, has to be in a treaty-based nation that is going to allow yourself to then open yourself up to E2 advantages and ultimately provide Uncle Sam a benefit as well. So that's number 2. Number 3 is very important. You as an applicant, you as that immigrant, have to invest or actively be in the process of investing. So I just broke that down into 2 parts. You either are already investing in the United States, or you're in the process of actively investing. So that can be very tricky sometimes, and that's where we come in as your attorneys to make sure that you are ultimately in good hands. We partner up with a lot of business consultants. There is a gentleman who's probably going to be watching this video as well. His name is Mr. Ladd Klein. Really good gentleman. He's been doing this for many years. We partner up with him, and he ultimately is our partner in this. And we have a lot of other partners as well that we team up with. And if you're interested in that, we would ultimately walk you through what is the best business for you. Are you actually actively investing in this company, or are you in the process of investing? These are things that you really have to speak with a business consultant about. Sometimes your attorney will be a business attorney as well. We like to separate the two just because we want to make sure that your legal interests are also being met and it's not being compromised by the business interests. So at the end of the day, we like to divide and conquer, but we do a pretty good job at making sure that USCIS, along with the State Department and the government overall, understands what your intent is from a business perspective, but also from a legal perspective. So that's number 3. That's very important. Number 4, your enterprise has to be a commercial enterprise. It has to be a real and operating commercial enterprise. That means it can't be a not-for-profit, can't be a nonprofit. It has to be something for profit. It has to be something that's going to ultimately create profit for you and your business. So ultimately, it has to stimulate that U.S. economy and create jobs, and ultimately, up the GDP, and in that region that you're in, that has to create growth. Your business has to grow. We understand here as attorneys that COVID has hit everyone pretty hard. But luckily, we do have contacts within USCIS that we work with, along with congressional offices, to make sure that you as the applicant are not ultimately getting jeopardized based on your application due to a lack of opportunities due to medical or COVID-based reasons. But that is something I just wanted to put out there, and we'll talk about that in our office if that is something that comes up. Now, number 5, the applicant's investment does have to be very substantial, right? And this is the biggest question I get in the consults. What is a substantial investment? Hey, Attorney Tripathi, Trip, how do we know how much money we have to put down for this E2 investor-based visa? Well, that varies. We've researched the case law. We've looked at the law. We've looked at the policy. We've done these. So we kind of understand. It's all based on the type of business and kind of what you're bringing forth to the table. So for example, this is one of the biggest questions we get. If you yourself as a potential investor from your home country trying to apply to these great United States of America, and you're trying to open up a consulting business versus a restaurant, well, that consulting business might be $60,000 to $80,000, and that might be considered a substantial investment, because when you're in a consulting business, you're literally having human capital. You're having some computers, you're having some laptops, rent, things like that are going to be somewhat reasonably priced. However, when you own a restaurant, you have to buy furniture, tables, you're going to have multiple staff, the food, the inventory, all of that. So it just depends, and that's when you speak with us as your attorneys, and we'll look at your business plan. We'll look at, and if you don't have one, we'll get one for you. We will also make sure that we look at kind of what your business and experience is about, and then we'll also match it up and marry it up with what USCIS, along with the State Department, has historically looked at. Specifically in this case, because it's an E2 visa, the State Department deals with it. Historically, what has been a substantial investment based on case law. So that's where we come in. That's why it's really important to have a lawyer for these kind of cases, and we'd be more than happy to help you with that. So that's just one thing I'd like to put out there. Finally, there's number 6. Basically, number 6 is that the investment has to be more than a marginal one, just solely to earn a living. This is one that gets a lot of people, right? Because ultimately, you can't just come here on a free ride, right? That's what the government's basically saying. We would love to have you here if you're listening in on this. We would love for you to stimulate that economy and ultimately live the American dream. But in order to do that, this can't just be a reason. You can't just have a bunch of money and just say, hey, I'm going to open this up and I'm not going to really do much. You have to have an active interest in this commercial enterprise. This can't just be something that's going to be a marginal one solely just to earn a living or just to kind of come here and have that free pass to the United States. That's not what we're saying. What the government's saying and what we're going to do for you is we're going to show the importance of this business of your way of life and how it impacts that community. And I think that is one of the most important arguments to make to the U.S. government, because they understand as well. They want their taxpayer dollars. They want to make sure that you're living a good life and you're doing within the confines of the law and the policy. So that's very important. And so that's going to be something that we really hone in on when you come to our office in that initial day for that consultation. We're making sure that this is not just something marginal. It's not a marginal enterprise. This is a commercial enterprise that you are investing your life into, and that you are going to invest and do well and succeed. And ultimately, when it comes time for that renewal and that extension, you're going to continue to succeed. And so that's where what we're here to do, and we have our business consultants on hand to make sure that that does apply as well. And then also, number 7, you have to be in a position, the applicant, right, has to be in a position to develop and direct the enterprise. So you as that applicant listening on this video have to be that manager. You have to be the CEO. You have to be the executive. You have to be the one making sure you don't have a passive interest in this business. It has to be a very active interest in the business. You have to make sure that you are involved on the day-to-day. You are the one managing, because that's very important. They want to make sure, the government does, that you're just not doing this just for some immigration benefit, but rather that this benefit of immigration based on the visa is coming because of what you're doing from a business perspective. So all that is very important to note. And we'll walk you through that. We'll show you the strategies and the opportunities within the confines of the law that you can utilize to ultimately put the best foot forward in front of the government. Number 8 is going to be that if you as the applicant are an employee, for example, you have to make sure that you're destined to be in an executive or supervisory position, or that you possess the skills ultimately to perform essential tasks, right? That your firm operations or your business commercial enterprise operations are going to have in the United States. So that's two things. Number 1, you have to be destined for a supervisory role. You have to be a leader. You can't just be someone at a lower tier position or opportunity. You have to be at a higher level tier opportunity, someone who's directing and managing in a supervisory role. And then number 2, you got to possess the skills. So that's where your CV, your resume, all that comes in. We look at your background experiences. So you can't be working, and we're making this example up for our viewership, but let's say, for example, you worked on cars your whole life and you're one of the biggest car manufacturers, automobile manufacturers from Germany, for example, and you come out with the biggest German cars and you're the biggest automobile manufacturer. Well, then it would be very difficult to prove to the government when you open up a restaurant, for example, having zero restaurant skills, that you're going to be very successful at that restaurant endeavor. So, and not to say that you can't be successful in that. It just means that we, as your lawyers, will try to show to the government what we can do to prove your experiences in front of the government to make sure that you do ultimately comply based on the experience requirement. So that's very important as well. And then finally, number 9. You have to have the intent to depart. I made a previous video on this, but because this is a non-immigrant visa, we have to provide some sort of evidence to the government on your behalf that you intend to depart the U.S. When your E2 status does terminate. However, the good thing is you always have the option to extend, and there are rules based on that per country. So if you're from Pakistan, the rules are going to be different versus if you're from Canada, they're going to be different, or versus if you're from the United Kingdom. So all these countries have different rules. So come into our office, we'll talk to you about it. So I know this was a little longer than expected, but it was a very sharp video. I know it's about 60 minutes running at this point, but it was something that I really wanted to hone in on because a lot of people know about the E2 program or they've heard of it, but ultimately, even if you've heard of it or know about it, do you qualify for it? And I think that's one of the most important things. What if your country that you're from is not a treaty-based country? Give us a call. We'll walk you through how to get around that. We can still get you an E2 visa. It just means that we have to just work a little harder. And that's okay. That's what we do for a living, and that's what we enjoy doing. So please give us a call at 863-370-2427. We'll be more than happy to walk you through that. But ultimately, long story short, just really glad that you were tuning in today on these E2 qualifications, that ultimately these requirements that make someone an E2 investor. We basically discussed all that. So finally, the 9 things that we discussed, I'm just going to wrap them up real quick. Number 1 was that there has to be a requisite treaty that does have to exist. Number 2, you have to have an individual or a business possess the nationality of that treaty country. You have to be from that treaty country, right? And if not, give us a call. We'll figure it out. Okay. Number 3 is that the applicant, you listening on this video, or maybe a loved one who's listening, you have to have either invested in a commercial enterprise or be in the process of actively investing in that commercial enterprise. That's important. Number 4, the enterprise has to be a real and operating commercial enterprise. It can't be a not-for-profit. It has to be something where you're going to actually make profits on the business and stimulate the U.S. economy. Number 5 is that the applicant's investment has to be substantial. And what is substantial? We talked about that. It's based on the case law, and we can talk to you about that as well. Number 6 is that the investment is more than a marginal one. It can't just be solely for you earning a living. It has to be something that's a big commercial enterprise. We have to actually show to the government that this isn't something marginal, and we'll go into that in future videos as well. Number 7 is that you as the applicant have to be in a position, right, to direct and develop that commercial enterprise. Leadership roles, right? And then number 8 is if you as the applicant are an employee of that business, you have to make sure you're in an expert or supervisory position and you possess the skills that are essential to perform that position. So that was that 2-part test we were talking about. And then finally, number 9, you have to have the intent to depart. We have another video on that where we created templates for you to show you that you do have the intent to depart. But here's the good thing. Based on your country, you can always extend or renew. So there's all these wonderful opportunities. And the best part about it is not only do you get an E2 visa if everything goes right, which we do a good job at this. This is what we do. But what's really even better is your spouse gets it. He or she gets also a derivative beneficiary status, and your minor children under the age of 21 who are unmarried also get it. So a lot of benefits here. You can also, we'll go into other videos about how you can actually adjust that E2 visa to a green card. even though we discussed it was a non-immigrant visa. There are all these strategies. So please give us a call. We'd be more than happy to speak with you. This is U.S. immigration attorney Hardin Tripathi from Trip Law, and we look forward to servicing you with your E2 journey. So if you have any questions, give us a call, 863-370-2427. If not, hope you found this nugget of gold very important, because we're here to help, and we look forward to serving you with your E2 journey. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.